Well, here we are with the teacher Humberto, the director of international business, and we are going to do some questions to him about the educational cluster in Puebla. Teacher, what do you know about the educational cluster in Puebla?
Well, what I know about the educational cluster is we are actually part of it. Like Tec de Monterrey is actually part of the educational cluster, and it is probably one of the most advanced in terms of, or the largest in Mexico, I would say. And it is kind of interesting because Puebla is one of the states that has the most universities in just one place, right? Or in a couple of cities. So that it's actually important. And we have presence here, like Tec de Monterrey, and also a lot of other universities that are good. The public universities are also good. So in general, the educational clusters in Puebla specifically, it's kind of strong.
Yeah. Okay. And which do you consider are the benefits from the educational cluster to the state?
Well, the most evident benefit is that we graduate a lot of prepared students. And that actually helps the industry and helps the economy, and that's how, basically how economies develop. So we have this knowledge part kind of covered.
Okay, and from the other side, which are the benefits that this state brings to the educational cluster?
I think that lately the state has had a good program in terms of developing the city and attracting investment. So that actually helps the educational cluster, because part of the purpose of education is, or the higher education institutions, is to provide, or not provide, but make their students actually get jobs. And the state has helped us somehow, or indirectly, not probably directly, to locate or to make these students have jobs in the state, and they don't have the need to go somewhere else.
So they all study here and they stay here afterwards.
Exactly. It is now more likely that they can do that.
Okay.
And on the other hand, there are also a lot of support for research and so on. Not only from the state, but mainly from the government, the national government.
Okay. Do you consider there is any risk for the cluster because of the location?
I wouldn't consider Puebla as a risky state. I would say actually the contrary. I think Puebla is one of the most, or one of the best cities in terms of quality of life and of security. And even though there have been problems, when you compare them with the rest of the country, well, it is actually pretty good living here. So I wouldn't say there is like a risk. I would say that the location is probably not that convenient, and that's why the role of the government is important, because they have to attract investment. Puebla, it's probably not a city that you would invest in just because of geographic location. And to give you an example, like for example, if we have Veracruz, it would be a state where you would invest just because it's a port, and it makes sense to invest there. And we have Mexico City, which is the capital, so it makes sense to invest there. And a lot of other cities have like a better geographic location. In the case of Puebla, we don't have such a great geographic location, but we are close to Mexico City and we are close to Veracruz, so
it's quite the center also.
Exactly. So it is a good option now, and that's where the government role is important.
Okay, and in your opinion, isn't security situation a threat for the educational cluster?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, lately we've heard about some news that concerned us, but in general, I think that Puebla is still a pretty safe city, and it's probably one of the safest in the country.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that that's a problem.
Okay. What kind of opportunities do you believe this cluster may have in order to grow?
I think that the biggest opportunity it has to do with jobs, with creating jobs. So in order for us to grow, there has to be more investment in the state. So there has to be a lot of more companies, so that actually students find it attractive to come here and then study here, work here.
Yeah, of course, because many people is graduating and just going out, but they also need someone to hire them.
Exactly. And even though Puebla attracts students from like all of the south region of the country, it's somehow for a lot of them easier to just go to Mexico City instead of coming to Puebla. So if we want to grow, what needs to happen is that they move here and then they can continue their life here.
Okay, perfect. Which do you think are the biggest challenges for the educational cluster?
I think the biggest challenge, and it's one that actually tech is addressing, is the change. And technological change basically has modified the way we live, the way we work, the way we act. The example that we always give is, let's take Uber or Airbnb or even Google. And if we look back probably 15 years, we realize that they didn't exist. Or between 15 and 20 years, they didn't exist. So now a person can make a considerable amount of money by being a YouTuber, for example. And that didn't exist. So what we're thinking of is that in the future, there will be new careers somehow, or new jobs. So I believe the challenge is for us to educate students and with the tools that they will need for jobs that we don't know which
that
are.
will exist.
Exactly, that they probably don't exist now.
Yeah.
And when they graduate, they will be doing that. And that's why actually tech has addressed this problem in terms of competencies and skills and so on. So our focus is not only in the content and knowledge, but it's also on the tools and skills that you acquire on your career, and that builds competencies in you, and that actually we believe that will help you when you get out, when you graduate, to make better, or to be able to handle these kind of jobs that we don't know which will be.
And could you mention 3 more factors that you consider are missing from the education in Mexico that are limiting the talent in Puebla?
When we speak about the entire educational system, I believe that, I would say, in my opinion, the most important one is that we do not give enough feedback. We usually work in an environment where you have to learn something and you have to deliver a project or whatever it is, and we do not take the time to give feedback. Because we have probably, particularly in public schools, such big groups that it's really hard for the professor to actually give feedback. And the second one is how we use grades. I believe that we do not use grades for the right purpose. We use grades to tell you if you did well or not, but it's usually on the upper part of the scale. So if we give you a 70, it's about grade. And when you compare that to the, for example, the European model, where if you really did bad, you probably get a 30 or like a 30% or 40%. And that actually gives you more idea of what you're missing.
Yeah, what you did wrong.
Exactly. In the other hand, if I give you a 90, for example, 90%, then you're okay with that.
Yeah.
And you will not try to improve somehow.
Okay.
On the contrary, if I give you a 60, then you realize that you have still 40% to go, and you still have to work a lot. And the third factor that I would mention is we are not a culture of reading and of researching And I believe that that would be really helpful.
Yeah, here I think it needs a lot of research from the students, just lead them to search what they need to.
Exactly, exactly. So we need to improve our reading habits, because even when you think about it, like a little student, a little boy or girl, and if he or she doesn't see their parents read and research and trying to find out things, then the culture actually doesn't help. But we have to work on that. I believe that that's a really important factor. It's not just about reading, it's about having the curiosity and wanting to know more.
Yeah, of course. And research, so you will have, in the research you will find another fields and you will expand your knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay, and do you consider that the educational cluster in Puebla is competitive? And
I would say yes, absolutely. Most of the, or not most of, but some of the most important universities are here, including Tech. And probably, for example, the biggest and most important public school or public university, which is UNAM, is in Mexico City. But let's say all of the rest, we're actually here. And in terms of public schools, they're also good. Like WAP is actually a really good public school. So I would say it's pretty competitive, and it also creates like a good environment, because there are so many universities that it is a city for students, or it's a better city for students compared with probably cities that only have 1 or 2 universities. And even though it's not a bad option, well, hundreds of universities, as the case in Puebla, then that's kind of better.
And do you consider that the educational cluster is taking advantage of new technologies and is being highlighted in investigation?
I think it is. It's going at a slow pace, but I think more and more universities are moving to these new technologies. In the field of business, which is mine, I would say that we have to focus more on startups and not only entrepreneurship. And that's because we need to have impact projects that are scalable, that can actually make a good impact or a big impact in the economy and the cities and so on. So I would say yes, but there's a lot of things to do still.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.